All right, so now that since we've already done our overview, let's dive into the basics of editing within Final Cut. So from last time, we set up and we got started on our project here. So we did it in 1080 and we just chopped in a few different things here, dropping them into the timeline. So now we're gonna dive in on how we can really start playing around with this. So first off, let's just talk about the basics of editing and how to manipulate the clips down here. So again, Final Cut is a non-linear editing system. So what I mean by that is that we're not destroying anything that we're doing here. We can easily undo it, get back to it, recover it, whatever we want to do. So we can really do whatever we want. So for the basics of editing, what we can do, here's a couple different things. If we want to trim the clips up, we can simply hover over the ends of the clips, click on the end, and then drag left to right. Click and hold, drag left to right, and we can change it to the time that whatever we're looking for. And you'll notice up in our viewer, we can see that there's some movement going on there telling us what the clip kind of looks like where we ended at. So we can do that going back and forth no matter where we click at. We have some other tools that we can use. So right up here where they have the little pointer at is we have some other tools, such as the trim tool. You can go into the clip and you can keep the timing of the clip the same, but you can move the frames left to right. So the timing stays the same, but you can shift the frames a little bit. The other tool that I want to show you guys right now is the blade tool. So the blade tool, as it shows, is like a scissors. It's just cutting the clips up. So if we wanted to make an edit right here, we can do that. And now if I move the playhead, we see that, hey, this is now cut there. And whatever we want to do with that clip, then if we click A, or do A, then we switch back to our pointer, then we can delete that out, we can move it around, we can put it wherever we want. It's its own unique clip now, and that's what the blade tool can do. The final thing that we can do for editing in terms of just basic edits is we can set ins and outs. So to do that is you use the letters of I and O. So I move my playhead and I select I. Press I on the keyboard, and then wherever I end the playhead and I press O, now that makes a whole selection of an area. Now, from there, what I can do is I can delete it out, same thing. Press the delete key, it moves it around, we can do different things with it. The same tool to kind of do this as well would be your range selection. So it's R on your keyboard. You can do the same things, you click and drag it across, and then that selects an area. Press delete, you can delete it, move it around, do different things like that. Another handy tool that you're going to be using quite a bit on your timeline, and I already kind of showed you guys earlier, is the zoom tool. So clicking here, you click on zoom, or it's just simple press the Z. You notice then that this becomes a magnifying glass. You can go ahead and you can click and drag across an area to zoom in and get closer so that you can do a little bit more fine tuning with your trimming. If you do Command Z, that brings it back out to see your whole entire timeline. You'll also notice there's the plus sign here on the magnifying glass. So if I just simply click 2, we can just zoom in, and we zoom in on smaller increments. The way to change that though is say that I zoom in a ways and I just want to back out a little bit, is I hold down the Option key, and then that turns it into negative, so it's going to bring it back out. I constantly find myself as I'm editing using this tool of just clicking and dragging over top and then Shift Zing out so that I can see the entire timeline again and then keep going. When you're editing as well, when you're trying to do some fine tuning, to move the playhead along, I've been clicking and dragging this whole time so far. That's how I've been showing you guys. But then to really fine tune it, you can use your arrow keys to go one keyframe at a time, or one frame at a time, going back and forth. So you can use that as well while you're trimming. Say if you're trying to just get to an exact spot, you can do that as well. All right, so that's kind of the basics for editing in Final Cut as far as our trimming tools and starting to be able to manipulate the timeline. Now let's talk about the timeline itself. The timeline in Final Cut, what makes it unique and what made it difficult at first for a lot of people to figure it out, is that they call it a magnetic timeline. So the difference here between other editors is that you have your main timeline here, and that's kind of indicated by this darker area. when you are working with this timeline, everything shifts around and moves it so that it's constantly connecting to the timeline and that you don't lose your timing on things. It's different because in other editors like Premiere and such, you have lanes and tracks and stuff like that, and you got to constantly line things up. And if you don't lock something while you're moving things around, like your timeline can get messed up pretty quick. That still can happen to a degree in Final Cut. It's just a lot harder to do so. And what makes the magnetic timeline awesome is that it actually speeds up your edit because of its connection points and things like that. As you may have noticed before, when I made an edit and I was dragging it around, for example, as I grab this here and I just drag this on top, you'll notice that now it's sitting on top, which is kind of standard. But here's the difference, is that it automatically snapped everything else back over. That's part of the magnetic timeline, is that it automatically cleared up the gap that was there. Now, there is ways to edit so that you can put the gap in, which we'll talk about in a minute. But what I want to show you guys is that now this clip, there's this little thing here, okay? This little thing is a connection point. Now, what is that connection point? What that is telling you now when you're editing is that this clip is going to be connected to this clip no matter what we do with this clip. So if I take this clip and I move it down here, I move it all around, it's going to stay connected there until I remove that connection or shift the connection. So that's what's kind of cool and powerful about the magnetic timeline, is that you can keep things put together and that when you're shifting things around, they will stay where you want them to stay. And if you don't want it there, if you do want to be moving stuff around, but you want to keep the B-roll here on top, that's typically what you'd put on top as some sort of B-roll. If you wanted to keep that up there, but you wanted to move around this bottom part, you simply hold down the tilde key. And then now you can shift it around and that stays while everything else shifts around. So it's a really powerful tool with this magnetic timeline. And once you kind of get the hang of editing with it, it makes things a breeze to keep things in place. All right, so let's go ahead and let's edit a little bit so you can kind of see everything in action. So we have some clips here, and what I want to do first off is I'm going to go back and I'm going to import a song that I downloaded for this project. So now I have this song here, we'll play it out. All right, kind of just a fun, funky little song that we're going to put together with this. Downloaded it off Soundstripe. All right, so I clicked and dragged the audio down here. You'll notice now down here, it has the connection point to this first clip. So that's what it's gonna be connected to. Now, when I work with audio, personally, what I like to do is I like to connect it to that first clip if I know that clip is not moving anywhere. Otherwise, what I may do is if the project is, say, starting from black, fading in, which we might do on this actually, is I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna put in a black space there. Now, to do that, to put in a little space into your project, it's simple. You do Option W, and that creates a gap, is what they call this here in Final Cut. So you created this gap space. Now notice that everything shifted over, including our audio, because it's connected to that. And what this is just a black space on Final Cut. That's all what it's looking at it as. So as you're editing, if you know, hey, I need the timing of this just right, but I don't know what I want to put there yet, you can put in a gap space. So that's the Option W. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to trim this down. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this down to a second. All right. So now this is 1 second long. And now I'm going to move the audio here. So what we're going to do is we're going to play around with this. I was going to start it at the beginning, but now I think if we maybe do a slow fade in from black based off of how the music's playing. So to do that, then to do a slow fade from black, I'm going to add in a fade transition. So this is something that you're probably going to use quite a bit. You simply click on the edge to make sure that it's highlighted yellow and do a Command T. Now what you're going to see is that this is spreading across 1 second. All right, that's the default. You can easily change that. So, but the 1 second I kind of like. So let's see here. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to trim this up just a little bit and shift this over here. Just so that hits a little better. Let's move it over a little bit here. There, I like that. All right, so now we have that transition into a second. and this is an editing tool that I find myself using quite a bit, is changing the duration of whether it's the clips, whether it's these fades. A lot of times I find myself just saying, you know what, I want it 3 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever it is. You just simply right click on what you want to adjust, and there's change duration. And then right in here, you just type in then what you want it to be. And keep in mind that it's based off the amount of frames you're changing. So if you're working in a project that's 23.98 frames a second like we are, it's only dealing up to 24 frames there. It's not working with 60 frames, like it's not working with a full second. So you got to keep that in mind and kind of do a little bit of math on that when you're punching in numbers. All right, so let's go ahead and let's just start editing. So I see here, so right away I see that it's not pushing in. The shot is kind of static for a second before we start moving in. So I'm gonna go ahead and use the T tool and change that over just a little bit. I'm just sliding some frames over. Gonna do it just a little bit more. It's almost there. I just want it pushing a little bit more. Still not quite there. Let's do a more extreme push. All right. So I see here as I'm watching this, I'm seeing like, you know what, it doesn't really pick up speed till about right here, which is about 3 seconds in. So I'm gonna actually split the distance a little bit. I'm gonna grab from right here and drag this over. So then I know that, okay, I just changed it by about 2 seconds. There we go, that's what I wanted to see. All right, that's what I was looking for, so that it's a nice push in on the drone as we're going. When it comes to editing to music, you don't always need to go by this, but it's always fun to kind of edit on the beats. So we'll kind of do the beat there. And this is actually a perfect example of, so because we're editing with frames here, you'll notice that I can't just quite slide it up to where I want it to go. It's either got to be the frames over here or here. And that's just simply because of how we're editing. If we had 60 frames, we probably could be a little bit more exact, but when you edit in 24 frames, 30 frames, sometimes you can't hit the audio exactly how you're looking for. So you just get as close as you can. There we go. And so see when we hit that beat there, it switches right over. Earlier, I had mentioned about we were going to edit this in 1080, but I shot everything in 4K. So if you're not familiar with video frame sizes, 1080 is standard HD. 4K is the next step up in quality. So right now a lot of TVs are 4K, some might even be 6K, 8K is kind of the bigger push right now that they're going for. So 4K is kind of like the standard of what most people have. But broadcast television doesn't really do 4K, so 1080 is still relevant. But to get to 4K from 1080, you actually have to take 4 individual frames of 1080 and put them together in a square, and that equals 4K. Well, what that means in our edit is that because all of our images are in 4K, we have the ability to crop in without losing any detail because we're looking at it on a 1080 platform. So let me go ahead and just kind of show you here. So I'm thinking right here, right when this beat hits, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put in an edit, all right? And so now I can click on this area here. So I use the blade tool. Now I can click in here. These are 2 separate frames, so I'm not affecting anything over here. It's only right here. And what I'm going to do is up in our inspector here, so we have a few different ways that we could tackle this. I'm going to transform this clip now. All right, you have this tool that's called Spatial Conform. So what Spatial Conform is that it's automatically taking care of the clip for you to stretch it or put it to the size that it needs to be to fit your current project framing. Right now, because it is in 4K, it's actually pushing everything down and making it smaller so that it fits in 1080, but still seeing the full image. A lot of times what you'll see is that because this is default to fit, photos, you'll put in photos, and photos typically aren't shot in for 1080 or 4K, so they'll get stretched out, or maybe they'll get shrunk down as well, and that's where you kind of see a lot of the difference. But in video, if you're 4K and it's being fit into something, you typically don't notice unless you're trying to go up a resolution versus down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually set that to none. All right, so now you'll notice, boom, it just shot in there. So this is set to none. So now what we're looking at is we still have our 4K footage, but now we're just looking at one instance of a 1080 frame, and it always starts in the center. So I have all this area that I can work with now. So just look at the difference though. This is what that shot would be being fitted for 1080 versus as, nope, this is the 4K shot. notice how much room we have here. And the reason why I like to work with it in this mode is because now when I go up to my scaling here, I can see that, okay, this is at 100%. I don't really want to push it much past 100% because then that's when distortion happens, because then you're blowing it up beyond what it's meant to be looked at. So instead, what I'm going to do is I can play around with this now. If you hit right around 50%, like 51%, you see that it fills up the whole frame again, and that's what we were previously looking at. So that's where I know, like, okay, I got that 50 to 100% that I'm working with that before I hit too far in. So for this shot, actually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of leave it at 100%, and I'm going to use my Y and X axis. So to see what I'm doing here, let's just go ahead and I'm going to shrink this down to 25% so you can kind of see more of what I'm playing around with. I am going to be shifting this around a little bit, so what you can see is that I'm moving the clip around just a little bit. I'm trying to get it set up more so we have a little bit more headroom there. Yeah, kind of something in the horizon a bit more centered. Yeah, kind of something like that. So let's just, for sake of ease, I'm gonna put the Y-axis at -100. So the Y-axis, if you're not familiar, this is old school math. The Y-axis is north and south. X-axis, east-west, left to right. I like that. That's looking pretty good. The other thing I'm going to show you, I'm not going to use it in this edit or in this particular clip anyway, is that you also have the ability to rotate your shot. Now, because this is 4K being cropped in, if I rotate it, you're going to see that we can do all sorts of rotation, and it just barely, kind of at the edge there, you see a little bit of black coming, but that's because we shifted it a little bit. But really, if we left this without moving at all, we probably could shift this whole clip around and there'd be no black. But because of how we're looking at it, we see a little bit there, but we have the ability to rotate this whole clip around too. So with that, now we have this clip here, so let's take a look. Let's go ahead and put this back to fit. So I like that. I like the little punch in there. So let's just play it out a little bit more. And you know what I'm actually going to do, because I know I'm going to end my clip about right here, so it's a little bit more dramatic. What I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead, take my T tool there, and I'm just going to shift the clips over a little bit. A little bit more. So that starts right about, yeah, let's see how that looks. Not quite yet. I'm going to shift that a bit more. There we go. All right, great. I like that. So then we did that so that it's a little more dramatic, so that it's more obvious that we made an edit there. So that we had this kind of coming in, and then we did that a little more dramatic, a little more of a push in. And then one other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how you can speed up clips and slow them down. So with this clip, because it was on my drone, I actually shot it at 30 frames a second. If you remember, we're working with a 24 frame second project. So what that means is that I have about 6 frames extra that I worked with. So what I can do is I can actually slow down the footage so that it's moving a little slower without actually losing the quality. So I go up to this little tab here where it's kind of like a little retiming clock. Click there. You see we have these options of slow, fast, normal, hold, blade speed. We're going to kind of work with these here. What I wanted to show you guys is, first off, to figure out if a clip can actually handle it or not, a few different things that you can do. You can go back to the original clip. If you click on it here and go to click on your eye, you can see that it says, yep, that's in 4K and it's at 30 frames a second. So I know I can manipulate it. That's one way that you could do it. Another thing that you could do is simply go here on the clip and just click on automatic speed. Now what that will do is that it will adjust the speed to match the project that you're in. If you were editing in 30 frames a second, this would automatically just say, you know what, nope, it's at 100%. It's at its best speed. So because it's in 24 frames a second, it said, you know what, yeah, we can slow this clip down a little bit more. Now, because it's only 30 frames a second, we're only seeing a very subtle difference. There's different reasons why you'd want to slow this down in 30 frames and do different things like that. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty details of it. I just want to show you guys that you can do it. For this clip, actually, what I want to do is I want to speed it up. So I'm going to go fast, and I'm going to go to 2 times, all right? And because of that, you'll notice in my timeline, because I sped up the clip, we actually lost timing on that. So what we need to do then is I went back and found where I wanted to put the edit, and I'm just going to click and drag this over. So it's going to maintain the speed that we want it at, which is 200 times faster than what it normally is. And now let's play that back and see how that looks. All right. So as you can see, like, it's a subtle difference of having it go a little bit faster, but I like it. It works. All right. And then here's an instance where, you know what? I think right when it hits that beat again, I'm going to go ahead and do the spatial conform, zoom in. There we go. All right. So then about right there, let's trim that up. And then let's maybe add 1 or 2 more clips. So let's go back up here, click on the clip I want to look for. Now, if you want to scrub through this, the tool that you're going to want to hit is S, and then that'll give you up your scrubbing tool. All right, so let's maybe throw that in here. All right, so let's find like 1 or 2 more shots. There we go. All right, and let's just see if there's 1 more shot here to use. But I kind of like this, kind of going back and forth. I should have held that shot. All right. So I'm just listening to the music now to see. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to add in just a little bit more because of how the song's kind of playing out a little bit. And I don't really feel like that the water shot is working for me here. So I want to replace this shot here. I'm not a big fan of it. I still might use it somewhere, but I want to replace the shot. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the shot with this guy. So I'm going to click and drag, hover over top, give it a second, and then let go. And then it's going to say, okay, do you want to replace the shot completely? Replace from the start, in other words, where my clip starts at, it's going to start at the start there. Replace from the end, same thing, just from the back end. Replace it and retime it to fit so that if I'm taking this clip, which is about a 30-second clip, putting it in there, which is 5 seconds, it's going to go ahead and automatically speed it up. Or you're going to replace it and add to Audition, which Audition is a tool that I don't really use, but it can be useful, where you can kind of replace different clips and just see how they time out and how they play. So what I'm going to do with this one, just to show you the speed up, because I kind of like the speed there, I'm going to do replace with the retime fit. All right, so you see it automatically did it. And on top of that, it switched it to the speed of 870 because that's how fast this clip needs to be to make it work. So let's take a look here. Yeah, I like that. That's cool. It's a good timing with that. So go ahead. I'm going to shift this over a little bit because it feels like it ends just a hair early. All right, so we're going to end this right at 30 seconds there. So we'll do that, and then we'll blade our tool here. Delete what we don't need. That's where we'll end this one. So hopefully you guys like the basics of just kind of how to get the editing going. We're going to get into more details in the next one as far as audio and color correction, so stay tuned.